Welcome to the presentation Causal Analysis Paper Explanation. Please follow along by looking at the handout, Major Paper 3, Causal Analysis Directions and Explanation. You should be able to find this both within the same page that you found this particular presentation, of course, and also up toward the top of our course website there's a Major Papers section, and I will put it there as well. We're going to talk about some of the assignment options, and in How to Write Anything, page 175, you'll see what their different options are, and I wrote the ones on our handout sheet to be more specific to our class. So you'll want to be looking at that. I don't have all the words typed out here in this presentation, so you're going to need to follow along on your sheet. Now, they have a number 2 research study option, and that's because sometimes they want to give you different options that may not involve quite so much research or different types of research. For this class, I'm not going to get too detailed into that direction, and I took that one away since we're going to do research for any of these options. The other thing to note is we get into the causal analysis, the first one. Remember, we talked about in our previous presentation that the term causal analysis is more of a broad term that can refer to a broad range of different approaches, and they're going to use a specific one called causal analysis here to kind of show a more broad general approach to the assignment here, but don't let that all throw you for a loop here. So the first one that they talk about is where you would examine a root cause of an event, phenomenon, or trend, something like that. Again, you're going to see the same thing repeated a few times in this project, but I left it this way to make it so that you do see that you can kind of go any number of directions that you want to go to. And they do have some nice sample questions that I added here. I guess I shouldn't have said they. I added some sample questions here that will help guide you as you get started on this. And remember, the idea of synthesis here, or synthesizing ideas, is where you might take multiple sources, multiple experts, and sort of take their ideas and explain them in your paper, cite them, integrate them, all of that good stuff, but then use them to kind of come up with your own new direction, your own idea, your own proposal, so to speak, or your own analysis. That's what we mean by synthesis here. So you might do some research and look what credible experts and sources identify as root causes and see what inconsistencies and contradictions you can find with that. And then, again, like we said, use their ideas and synthesize and come up with your own direction with it. You may want to look at the example global warming and the sun that starts on page 141 to help better understand this sort of general approach. Another option is the exploratory / refutation essay. And when I looked at their different options, one thing that I saw as an inconsistency is that whereas in the argument paper section they were talking about refutation, here they talk about that in the exploratory section. It's kind of jumbled a little bit, so I sort of combined those and put them in here. Basically, what you're going to do here is you're going to find an article that seeks to explain a cause and effect relationship, then write a detailed response to the causal issues it raises. And of course, you'll add your own research to this as well. For example, you could discuss why you find it convincing or speculate about how society might respond to its conclusions. But again, the idea here is that you're taking one specific essay and replying to it in terms of cause and effect, but again, then bringing in your own other research to help back your ideas up. They have an example called What's Really Behind the Plunge in Teen Pregnancy, and that starts on page 157. Another option is cultural analysis. This is where you would pick something more cultural or sociological to get into. You might identify a trend that you've noticed or a change in society or culture that deserves more scrutiny. It might relate to technology, entertainment, political preferences, fashion, popularity of careers, or other areas. So again, kind of choose your own adventure with this one. Write an analysis of it, thinking about either causes or potential consequences of this, whatever's going on, this new mania they call it. This one they talk about bringing in images that help illustrate it. Again, this isn't something that you can use 2 pages of images and 2 pages of writing to make your 4 pages, but the images can help make your grade better because they help better explain. So think about that. They also talk about how you might want to spend some time in the opening of your paper describing the trend and establishing that it is consequential, because sometimes people view cultural and sociological things is not really all that important, and so you might have to take more time explaining to them why it is important. You could also do what's called a prediction analysis, and this is kind of a fun idea here. A lot of people offer predictions, and that's a good way to get general viewers' attention, right? Is to make predictions, because everybody wants to know what happens in the future or what the experts think is going to happen. And so you see a lot of this, and this happens with entertainment, this happens with culture, this happens with politics, this happens with sports, all kinds of things. So they give some different examples here in the book on page 175, again, that you can look at. But this is something that you could do. Identify a prediction about which you have some doubts. Develop a cause and effect analysis to suggest why it is likely to go awry. In other words, why you think it's wrong. And be sure to explain in detail what factors you expect will make the prediction go wrong. If you are brave, offer an alternative vision of the future. So those are some different directions to go. We'll talk about topics, here in just a minute, and some other specifics as well. Something to keep in mind with this paper is you're going to want to use your argument skills. And what we're doing in this class, I've made no secret of it, is that in the first 2 to 3 pages or papers, we looked at some basic skills that you're going to need, some basic writing skills, and some just basic approaches. And one of those is using argument. And again, argument is sort of a broad term and a broad approach that you're going to use to a lot of different types of writing and a lot of different types of papers. And this is one of them, a causal analysis. So make sure that you don't forget about those argument skills, making sure that you have a disputable and arguable claim, making sure that you're presenting lots of evidence, you're maintaining credibility, all of those kinds of things. And again, that you're watching out for logical fallacies as well. Regarding topics, as we discussed in the assignment options section here, broad range of things you can write about, mostly your choice. There are a few topics that I'd like us to stay away from. One is medical marijuana, another is distracted driving, simply because we covered those ad nauseum in the first couple of papers. Other things like abortion, the death penalty, again, some students just love to jump on and write about really controversial topics, and that's fine, but oftentimes that makes for a lousy paper, so we're going to avoid that, simply because, again, a lot of people are so close to that they can't really write a good paper on it at this point. Another thing that we're going to avoid, the Affordable Care Act, which some people call Obamacare. Really, that's one where because things are changing with that so much, and again, because there are so many tempers going off about that, and because, quite honestly, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There are people who are for it but don't really understand it. There are people who are against it but don't really understand it. Some of you may have seen the famous clip from the Jimmy Kimmel show where he goes out in the street and interviews, and a whole bunch of people are all for what's called the Affordable Care Act. They think it's great, but they talk about how terrible Obamacare is. Well, they're the same thing. And again, I have some issues with the way that comedy sketch was. It probably isn't entirely accurate. They find the ridiculous people and highlight them. But the ultimate thing is with that, it's a topic that's just, there's so much out there right now, and it's changing so much, it's just not really viable. You're going to end up getting yourself into a train wreck if you go after it. So please don't write about that. And please don't use a topic you used for a previous paper. Again, if you want to talk about some topic ideas, contact me, sit down with me and have a meeting, or talk with me on the phone somehow. We'll make it work. There are more aspects to this paper you need to look at on the handout, like how many pages, how many sources you need, things like that. Again, I try to use these presentations to explain the things that you might need to hear people say out loud to be explained, but you should be able to read a paper and see what the goals for it are and some of the other parameters. So make sure that you look at that, make sure it's on an APA or MLA format, things like that. Good luck, and again, if you need some help, contact me. Let me talk with you about it. Again, a lot of us are not used to doing this kind of paper, so you'll be working hard. You may get confused. So again, I'm here to help you. Good luck.